Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your hosts, Jake and Scott. In this week's episode, we are talking big boy whiskey. That's right, Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. You've seen everyone's reviews. Now it's our time to give you what we think. Fresh palate, fresh year. Let's look back and see what 2024 Buffalo Trace Antique Collection has to offer. Scott, how's it going, man?
It's going. New year, new me, right?
Yeah, fresh palate, right? Yeah. We were both laughing a little bit because we, over the holidays didn't post much. We were kind of chilling. We were present with our families. I think that's always a good thing. And now it's time to look back a little bit and pour one of the most sought after whiskey collections of 2024, which is the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection.
I was going to say it released so late in the year. It was like, wow, when you blink, it's after the holidays and now it's 2025.
It is. And we'd be remiss if we didn't shout out the Buffalo Trace PR team for allowing us to be able to try this for the second year in a row. Again, we do not take this for granted. Years after chasing bottles and trying, different things at bars, $80 pours for Thomas H. Handy one time. You appreciate the little things in life, and this is one of the great appreciations that I have. So shout out to the team at Buffalo Trace, Jaleesa, Corey, Christy. They're awesome, and thankful we get to work with them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Didn't you just finish a bottle of BTAC recently?
I did. So I finished a Thomas H. Handy from 2019.
That was a good bottle, man. That was good. It was
good. It was in our March Madness bracket.
Way back.
Way back. And funny enough, I just saw Wayne's going to do a March Madness bracket. So shout out to Wayne. Good luck with that. It is a row to hoe for sure, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's just deciding what to put in the bracket.
Yeah. And we had some heavy hitters. When you think about that, like college basketball's in full swing. Louisville had a good win against the other day. Kentucky's doing really damn good, and thank you, Arkansas, and your chicken money for buying Coach Cal out of the contract.
What a mess.
Really appreciate it.
What a mess. Holy cow.
It's March Madness is going to be here for, we're going to blink. This episode will come out, end of January, early February, and, we'll be talking tournament time not too far after that.
I was going to say, everybody being cooped up in their house, bad weather, everything else. There's lots of sports going on right now. So there's a lot to see.
Yeah. Playoff football. You got college football national championship. You got the inauguration. That's kind of a cool thing. There's a lot of cool bets you can do on the inauguration, like how many people will be there. What's the weather going to be like? Like it's really cool. I think that's kind of funny. Betting has changed the world. That's for sure.
Everybody's got an opinion, and now people can use their opinion to bet on things. So
exactly. Somebody's got to make money. Might as well be the degenerates.
Yeah.
But getting back to the thing at hand, Buffalo Trace, before we get into this, also just announced their Prohibition collection for the second year. It's a whole new lineup from what I gather. It's a great press release. Go check out bourbonlens.com. But what do you think about them coming back out with the second run of the Prohibition collection?
I wish I could try it. I think it's super cool. Like when brands, because there's a lot of like new brands that are trying to bring back labels and stuff.
Yep.
So it's like when brands kind of dig into the archives and bring out those old labels, I think it's pretty cool. Obviously the price point is a lot higher than I want to pay, but yeah. And then this year they're also pairing it with cigars, which I thought was way out of left field. Like, but maybe that's the next big thing. It's like, hey, let's dive in with cigar pairings with each individual release.
Yeah. Well, I think what's also interesting is you hit on this and what's going to happen in 2025, and we've already seen it already this year. Michael Key just partnered with Jim Beam. You have this cigar pairing with Buffalo Trace. And I think we're just on the precipice of it. And that is what's going to be very interesting, is continuing to see these collaborations and how do you get people back involved.
Chris Stapleton, Traveler Whiskey, another Buffalo Trace product.
Yeah. And Dale Jr.
Gonna be driving around in circles on a NASCAR track in Daytona, and hopefully they qualify for the race, which that's something people didn't really probably pay attention to if you don't really follow NASCAR, but not every car that goes down there to get into the race actually gets into the race. So somebody's going home. So
yeah, it's a cool looking car.
I thought so too.
I thought it was cool. I'd be interested to see does Rebel come back with Kyle Busch. I don't know if that's happening again this year or not.
Yeah, it is. They redesigned the car, and it's going to be back on the car for. I didn't catch how many races, but yeah, there's going to be quite a few whiskeys on NASCAR again.
I mean, I think, you get past the average NASCAR person just enjoying their beer. Maybe they enjoy a whiskey too.
I bet. Yeah.
You doing fantasy NASCAR again this year? Speaking of,
yeah, you know it.
Oh man,
I won again last year. Not as big of a pool, but keep the streak alive.
There you go. So somebody's got to win. See, you're a degenerate too, just in a different way.
Yeah. 36 races, $50 buy-in. It's like, yeah, it's not a huge investment.
It's a long journey though. It's a long journey.
Yeah.
It's what, February to October?
November.
Oof. So
it's basically every month. I mean, they take 2 months off, and it's Christmas.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically like the PGA. They now you got the TGL or whatever it's called. The indoor golf league just started, and that thing is awesome. Like technology wise, that thing is cool. Like I don't know if it's going to take off or not, but the technology in that place is sweet.
I'm not a golfer, but I would find the depth perception to be very difficult to adjust to.
Yeah, because you're smacking a ball into a screen. But like the green is the coolest thing because it can undulate and like it's got motors in it and it can flip around, and like that thing is high tech. And you're hitting off grass or sand or rough depending on where you are.
Yeah, it's a cool stadiums or a spectator stadium sport. Yeah. Like I thought that was a cool element.
Yeah, and then like Tiger Woods coming out to the Eye of the Tiger. Didn't even say his name. I thought that was cool. Even though his team got dragged like bad. But anywho, you know what solves all the problem on the golf course? If you lose fantasy NASCAR, if you make a bet and you don't win, it's whiskey. Whiskey solves a lot of problems. And Buffalo Trace Antique Collection really solves the problem when you get into it. So for those who don't know what Buffalo Trace Antique Collection is, it is a lineup of 5 offerings from Buffalo Trace featuring Sazerac 18 or Sazerac 7, Sazerac 18, Eagle Rare 17, Thomas H. Handy. You have George T. Stagg, which they call it Daddy Stagg or, the Stagg, right? And then you have the one that everyone really chases, I feel like more and more, is William LaRue Weller. So that high proof wheated bourbon from Buffalo Trace. So we tasted these blind a different day from the show. We don't want to spend a ton of time getting into the tiny details. Our advice to you is very simple. If you have the opportunity to try it at an affordable price, try it. And if you have the opportunity to get it at an affordable price, get it. These are all really good whiskeys. There's got to be a first place. There's got to be a last place when you're ranking 1 to 5. That's just the way these things work. And so we want to share a little bit about what our favorite ones were, as well as what came in last and why. And again, we're not saying that any of these whiskeys are bad. We're just saying that we had to rank them, and we ranked them the way we did. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up for a second. And Scott, I'm going to let you go first because you tasted your whiskeys before I did. You tasted them a couple days ago. I tasted them last night. What was your favorite Buffalo Trace Antique Collection for 2024?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when it was revealed what it was, but it was the William LaRue Weller. I was kind of surprised when I revealed them. My wife had poured them blind for me, and I'd let them set for a little while. Kind of tasted through. I thought I identified what each of them were, and then when I picked my favorite, I was like, "Well, what was that one?" It was WLW Weller. So it's just something about it. I think that in terms of like complexity, that was what I was expecting from a big boy whiskey such as this, or big girl whiskey, whatever you want to say. But like for high dollar whiskeys, that's what I look for. Complexity, character, not always like proof or age or anything like that, but some of those things do help develop some of those flavors. So that was my favorite. I thought it was George C. Stagg.
Wow. So you got a little bit of a rye bourbon versus a wheated bourbon mix.
Yeah, I'm not good at identifying the difference. I'm really not. Never have been.
I mean, it's really hard. I mean, like those are gnat's ass details that people don't always pay attention to. It's really hard to come up with this. And, you know, it is celebratory because this is the 25th anniversary of Weller's addition to the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. So that's I feel like that's a pretty big deal. Pretty big detail in that. So what's really interesting, the WLW was aged over 12 years. It's uncut, 125.8 proof. They have their notes as new leather, caramel, marshmallow, and ripe fruit, and was awarded best of class in the 2024 Global Whiskey Challenge. What were your tasting notes that you got for the WLW?
Yeah, and I think that's probably where I was coming off thinking it might have been like George C. Stagg. Because I was expecting like a lot more oak for like a George C. Stagg, but like that's what I got with this one. It was like rich oak, like it just tasted older. But then also like when I got the tasting notes, I started like describing characteristics of the whiskey rather than like tasting notes. So I said like up front, I got a lot of heat, which as expected was 120 something proof whiskey. But then it went to like spice, sweet, salty, savory. Like it kind of went through like these waves of flavor. And I said it was the most, like my note was most complex. And it was the fourth one I tasted. So it was like I was building up to this and it just kept going and going and going. And I think that's probably where I didn't go into like, oh, it tasted like this type of fruit or that type of fruit. Because it wasn't a whole lot of fruit to me. It was just like waves of flavor. It was like all of the sensory, all of the taste buds kind of were active.
That makes sense. And I'm drinking it right now as we sit here and talk about it. And it's definitely, now knowing what it is, like you do get that wheat characteristic on the palate because you're looking for it. Like, you know, that's there. It does give a rich, creamy mouthfeel. It's slightly astringent on the palate. It like zaps the moisture off of it because it is, higher proof, but it's like a little peppery. It's bold. It's got a little spice to it. But overall, I mean, I think it is a really, really solid pour. I have to disagree with you though. I don't think it was my favorite, or do I think it was my most complex whiskey that I drank? And I say whiskey very importantly because my favorite of the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection this year was Thomas H. Handy. Which is really interesting. Similar proof point, 127.2, I think. 127.2. What's really interesting about this, just reading from the press release here at bourbonlens.com, this is unfiltered rye, offers aroma of black pepper, cinnamon with a bold palate, oak and spice. It was awarded double gold at the 2024 Singapore World Spirits Competition, and they say it continues to be a tradition of excellence. What I found very interesting about this was, one, I think the rye whiskey for THH is just so unique and different every year. Like it just so much different than everything else in the portfolio because of the big boldness of the rye whiskey. But I loved how tropical it was. Like it just felt like a tiki cocktail and a drink to me. I got some kiwi, some mango, some orange. Like I felt like if I threw this over ice, shook it up a little bit and just, sipped Mai Tais all day. Like that's what I felt like. I was just sitting on the beach chilling. And I really enjoyed that. But there had a nice spice complexion to it that made me want to come back to it. It is the lowest pour that I have left of the group here. And so I thought it was an exceptional rye whiskey. Would put this in as an early or late entry to one of my top rye whiskeys of 2024. It doesn't take the cake. There was one that I thought was better than this, but I do put this at the top 5 rye whiskeys that I had in 2024, even though I drank it in 25. So what was your just opinion of Handy?
Yeah, so I just poured it again and it ranked pretty high for me. I identified the ryes. See, now I am good with identifying rye versus bourbon, so I picked those two out, and then that was based upon proof too. I was just like, I pinpointed which one was handy pretty early on in the tasting, and to me, it had that orange rind, like that orange oil that I look for in like rye whiskeys, and but it also had like this cola, like not cherry cola, but like Dr. Pepper, like layers of flavors in a cola.
Yeah.
Like root beer, cherry cola, Dr. Pepper, like all of those kind of like came to me. But I also noticed that it was a lot brighter. Like it wasn't dark and rich. It was just had like this lightness that kind of came later. Like after you get kind of through those, like the effervescent cola note, it kind of like brightens up and like kind of made my mouth water.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is a great pour to go back to overall. So now, not to be doom and gloom, we've hit on a couple of these. But what was the one that kind of lagged behind for you? As I mentioned, these are all really good whiskeys. But there's got to be a fifth place in this. So what was your fifth place?
Yeah, fifth place for me was George C. Stagg. And I was kind of surprised that it was, because like I said, I thought George C. Stagg was the one that I was drinking as Weller. It had the Buffalo Trace, like that cherry note, but it almost took it too far for me. It almost took it like almost like medicinal cherry.
Mm.
And it was just a proof bomb. I mean, it was just so proof heavy, just kind of overwhelmingly proofy.
Yeah.
And I think that probably covered it up. It might do a little bit better whenever it sits in the glass for a little bit longer, or when these bottles open up a little bit more.
I mean, 136 is a lot of proof, man.
Yeah. I thought I gave it a fair shake sitting out for, 10, 15 minutes, after my wife had poured them. But yeah, it was proofy. I mean, that was my second tasting. It was just proofy.
Yeah. I mean, my first one on the nose was astringent. Like it lights up your nose. It did have some complexity to it where, you get some toffee, some orange peel, some, nutmeg, you get that vibe from it, graham cracker almost. But the weird thing to me, cause GTS was also my number 5, was the nose and the palate didn't really match up for me. I got this really grassy note off of it, which was really weird to me. And I thought it was uber spicy. And maybe that's to the proof of it all, but it just didn't really hit my palate in particular. Now, I've seen many reviews that people love it, and that's great. Every palate's different. And that's why I love talking about this stuff, because you're going to have a different list than I am.
I think you can be also sensitive to that proof. But that really doesn't address the nose so much. I mean, I wrote a couple of my tasting notes were like mint, menthol. I wrote cherry, but then I also wrote musty. Like it had like this musty, like wet, maybe like wet grass note to it. I just poured a little bit more because I had to go back to it.
Yeah, I did as well. I just poured it again. So this is aged 15 years, so it's going to have that oak complexity to it. It's 136.1 proof. They say it offers a complex profile of dark cherry, aged wood, and spice, recognized as best bourbon at the 2024 International Whiskey Competition. This bold spirit continues to impress enthusiasts. It's amazing that like each of these bottles win something. Like that's what, like we're splitting hairs. But the grassy note is just way weird in this, that I'm just kind of like, maybe it's me, but because you're also getting it, I don't think it's me.
It's almost like, to me, it's like it wants to be like tobacco, but it's got like a little bit too much like straw or like barnyard, like hay to it. Yeah,
I mean, you could call this a farm whiskey, because it does have that, like not in a bad way. I like the smell of a farm. Most people might not, but like it's just big and bold, And if you don't like the big and boldness of the way it leans, then it may turn you off to it. But I still think it's a really good bourbon. What's really interesting, what I'm about to do, and I think everyone should do, especially if you drink 136 proof whiskey, is you take some of your finest Louisville tap water, if you're in Louisville, and you drop 2 beautiful droplets of water in there, and we'll report back here in a second. I do want to go back to, we haven't hit on 2 of these, and the older 2 in particular. So we have not hit on Eagle Rare as well as Sazerac. So me and you were chatting prior to this. It was kind of splitting hairs for you on these 2, if I'm not mistaken. For you, just talk a little bit about the Eagle Rare. I think it's a beautiful whiskey, but I think it was a little bit higher for you than it was for me. So what did you think of the Eagle Rare?
Yeah, it was kind of splitting hairs with the Sazerac or the Thomas H. Handy. And it was really just like, am I feeling a bourbon or am I feeling a rye? I think where that one might have fallen a little bit short was probably like the proof point, but I understand why it probably did, because if it's a 17-year-old whiskey and it was 130 proof,
you'd be chewing a log.
Yeah. So it's like you're balancing you're bringing the proof down to help tamper some of that oakiness. But overall, I would say when I was ranking them, I would say it was probably 2.5 out of 5, out of the 5.
Yeah.
I kind of went back and forth with the THH. I thought THH just had more complexity.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what, like I said earlier, that's kind of what I was looking for. Like when you're looking at these bigger, bolder whiskeys, higher priced whiskeys, you're looking for, it's like a meal, right? You pay for a big meal. You want layers of flavor. You want kind of different dishes. You want different courses versus if you're just paying like $20.
You want to know.
Meal, you want a good steak and a potato.
Yeah.
And you want,
just cook it right? Like I don't need to like have extra butter on it. Like it doesn't need to have like a jumbo lump crab on top of it as well, right? Like I don't need the surf and turf of it all. Like if you're
like if I'm having mac and cheese, it's going to be mac and cheese. But if I want to pay up for it, it's going to be lobster mac.
Exactly. But
so,
you know what?
That's kind of where I was at with just looking for those flavors.
You know what? Lobster mac needs to be out. Bacon mac needs to be in.
Ooh,
just
not had that.
I just feel like bacon and macaroni and cheese are just meant to be together, and I don't see it a lot. I know
retaining the crunchiness of the bacon. Though,
exactly. Well, you gotta layer that on top, like your crumble versus like croutons. No one needs croutons on top of their mac and cheese. Bacon bits, crispy bacon bits, and center cut bacon. New find. Watching all the influencers about my health. 2 strips of center cut bacon. Only 4 grams of fat, 8 grams of protein. Hack, for sure. But let's get back into the last rye whiskey. And to me, the rye whiskeys I thought were just head and shoulders above the bourbons this year. And love that. Like I love that for Buffalo Trace because they're known for bourbon. But like they do put out exceptional rye whiskey. And shout out to Costco. You can get Baby Saz for $21 at Costco in Louisville. That's a hell of a deal. Hell of a deal.
So are the Handy and the Sazerac 18, is it the same mash bill?
Different, I believe. I think one's more rye, one's more Kentucky style.
Interesting.
I think. I could be wrong. Please someone tell me if I'm stupid because that's about right.
They both have Sazerac on them.
True. I've never seen
I think they're both Kentucky style. I don't think either of them are like 90+% rye.
I doubt it. But Buffalo Trace is really weird about their mash bills, so
they don't reveal them.
Fat chance getting that information out. Yeah. I'm sure we could probably go over to our friends at Breaking Bourbon and they've done something.
Yeah, I'm sure.
If you do want the Nat's ass details, like on everything, Breaking Bourbon's where it's at. Like those guys, they've been in the game a long time. They know what they're doing. But us. We definitely don't know what we're doing. But we have a good time. So 18 years old and 5 months. So this makes this the oldest one this year, where like last year, Eagle Rare like was almost 20 years old. So they say it delivers deep oak, leather, rye, dark cherry licorice on the palate. And also took home International Wine and Spirits Competition gold medal. So what I found really interesting to me, this was Andy's Mints. I really enjoyed that. Like I just had a nice Olive Garden meal, and you all can shame Olive Garden all of you all ever want, but like you're missing out. Like never ending pasta, like just go and enjoy yourself. Or if the buy one, get one take home, like, come on guys, unlimited salad, just no olives, no black olives. This is, can't be doing that. But like there was like this mint chocolate orange thing going on that I was here for. I wanted all of it. And it was a beautiful, beautiful whiskey to me. And so I thought the ryes were king this year. I do love a good rye whiskey. I may lean more rye than I do bourbon most of the time. I probably drink more bourbon, but I like rye maybe a little bit more than I do bourbon. But thought the Handy and Sazerac were clearly 1 and 2. Final order for me, Eagle Rare and WLW split 3, and then GTS was a little bit behind the group there. If you could give your final order, Scott, on what you ranked 1 through 5.
Oh, goodness. I would go with WLW, THH, Eagle Rare, Sazerac 18, and George T. Stagg was my 5th.
So the Bourbon Lens, how we do math here, that would make our official number 1 THH and our official number 2 WLW. That's how our math works here.
That's fair. If my favorite, yeah.
My favorite,
best rye,
best bourbon.
THH, best bourbon, WLW.
Yeah. And Eagle Rare gets a half because
I didn't really comment much on the Sazerac 18, but for me, some of the notes that you got with the Handy, you said tropical fruits. That's kind of what I got with the Sazerac.
It's so wild, isn't it? Like that we can just get different recall on what we experience.
Well, that's why tasting notes are shit, right? Like you say banana, I say pineapple. You know, you say pina colada, I say daiquiri. Like who really knows? Like talk about
Nobody
the experience
knows.
that you have. Yeah, talk about the experience you have, like why you think others might like it. I think that's most important.
Yep.
Like the Sazerac, for an 18-year-old rye whiskey, lots of flavor, even at a lower proof, but the flavors were not as in your face.
Mm-hmm.
It was like light, tropical, airy. I said pineapple dum-dums. Like that's one of my tasting notes. But I also said it was like juicy. Like it like left me wanting more.
So the rye whiskeys, both of them, you have said that they left you wanting like just to go back for another sip. So that good job, Sazerac. Congratulations.
Especially for a rye, for me. Yeah. I mean, it's like sometimes bourbon, it punches you and you're like, all right, I feel warm inside. I'm all, warm and fuzzy. But like sometimes those rye whiskeys, like they just bring something more, bring something different.
Hey, just like the SEC, it means more.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Well, we shouldn't because the SEC didn't make the college football championship this year. We failed. But oh well, life goes on. Can't always be.
Everybody can start paying players, then it changes things.
Oh, okay.
That's that meme.
Okay, Shane Gillis. That man when he called Nick Saban.
I thought he was gonna jump out of his chair.
Yeah, he called him Indiana Jones. That was great. Shane Gillis is hilarious. We're in a good age. This will be my last statement. We'll carry this over to another conversation, but we're in a good age of comedy. I think we've got a new young bucks of comedy coming up, but we're also in the golden age of consumerism for bourbon. I believe in the next 3 to 5 years that all of these whiskeys that we're talking about, hard to get, super allocated, extremely high price, the average drinker will be able to get them again. That's my bold prediction. And it could be sooner than that, but I think we are on pace with everyone doubling, tripling, quadrupling production. These types of barrels and these types of bottles will be available for the average consumer to enjoy. And that is a big deal to me as a person, and for those people who have never been able to try these whiskeys.
Yeah, I think like getting back to the special occasion bourbons, right? It's like we've all kind of gotten away from that because the prices have all like shot up.
Yep.
Like everything's a special occasion bourbon.
Yep.
So like buying the just got paid, you just got a raise, just got a bonus, like go out and buy that $200 bottle and it be on a shelf. I think that'll be pretty cool.
It will be cool. Yep. My 21-year-old self is pinching itself. You know, we're only 14 years after the fact where I could have bought every one of these bottles like 15 times over.
Otherwise, we'd probably be about 30 years older, you know, because we would have started a podcast like 15 years ago and that would have aged us a little bit more. That's
fine. We would have been ahead of the game. We would have been sitting there with Mark and Breaking Bourbon and Bourbon Pursuit. We would have been the OGs. We're like the new age outlaws. Yeah, there you go. Road Dog, Billy Badass.
We'd be the Road Warriors.
Oh man, that's exactly who it would have been. The tag team before the tag team. Yeah, oh man. And then before that was the Four Horsemen. I mean, come on. Who doesn't love wrestling? And big wrestling news today at the end of the podcast. WWE and TNA announced a partnership.
Yep. Oh, really? I never saw that coming. I thought it would be like AEW.
Yeah, so TNA and WWE linked a partnership. So NXT members can go to TNA and TNA members can go to NXT, and there'll be crossover events.
Now's our time to get into wrestling.
Now's our time. Like let's veer the podcast into wrestling.
No, I meant like go wrestle.
Oh, we're wrestling. What's our name? We got to think. We'll come back to this.
Give that some thought.
Okay, so next podcast episode, names for Jake and Scott. It's got to be something legal. You know, I think but it can't be the Hammer. Obviously, that's taken by Daryl. But we got to think of something. There's got to be some legal element, maybe some liquor element, maybe some football. We can figure this out.
Interesting.
So if you got any good names, if you're still listening to this, definitely let us know. But super excited. Let us hear your thoughts. If you've been able to try the BTAC collection for 2024, we'd love to know. And we'll engage with you throughout the week ahead. We really appreciate you all listening to us. We're excited, man. 2025 is going to be a great year. 3 episodes in a row, Scott and Jake. This is amazing. Maybe we'll make it 4. You never know. But we do have some upcoming guests and podcasts, so pay attention because we're going to be talking chicken cock whiskey soon and whatever else comes in waves because that's the way the podcast rolls. So make sure you're downloading and subscribing to the Bourbon Lens everywhere, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Make sure you're connected with Scott and I via social media on Instagram, X, and Facebook. We'd love to connect. And if you're more the professional type, follow us over on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter, The Weekly Pour. For exclusive content and more, check out Patreon. Follow us there at Bourbon Lens. And last but not least, on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you're subscribed because every Monday, Scott and I release a podcast, and we would love to have you here listening to the newest features and the newest whiskey news. And until next time, cheers.